Hello, Thinking Out Loud friends. Nathan Rittenhouse here. Just a quick heads up on this episode. We change our direction and tone significantly in the second half of this podcast. So I hope you listen to the whole thing. I hope you listen to all of our podcasts all the way through. But this one in particular, if you only hear our tone and posture at the beginning, you'll miss where we conclude. And we're happy about that change and see that as success in what we're trying to do as we think out loud about life together. That we can encourage each other to get pointed in the right direction. So hope you enjoy listening along with us and thinking along with us in this episode.
Hello and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
And I'm your co-host, Nathan Rittenhouse.
You know, you can't miss the headlines on Damar Hamlin right now. I mean,
and literally, like every single news outlet.
Every publication. It is everywhere. So I'm curious, Nathan. The first time that I saw something on this, I was scrolling on Facebook, of all places, and a fairly prominent pastor I know, gentleman who wrote the foreword to the book that I wrote with my dad, Faith at Lasts. So for those of you who want to do a little detective work, but he had posted about it, and he said, "I'm truly speechless. That was terrifying to see. Prayers for Damar Hamlin." And of course, listeners, it will come as no surprise to you, I didn't know who that was. But then I just started seeing more and more posts on it, and so started following the story. I'm curious, Nathan, I'm guessing you didn't hear about it scrolling on Facebook.
No, how did I? Yeah, no, it's through some. Well, I mean, by the next morning, pretty much every news outlet had it. I mean, I usually bounce through 5 or 6 different news outlets in the morning, and if there's something that all of them are talking about, then I usually like, oh, I should look in on that. My initial, and in fact, I had sent you an email with that as a list of like interesting things that I had seen going on. Um, so here's a bit of, well, I'll just throw it out there. This is going to sound callous, but I thought, oh, another football player got hurt.
Mhm.
Next. And then as it continued to, I kept thinking, man, it's really fascinating to me how many people are surprised or shocked. Now, when you go back and you look at it, it is a very, very rare. I mean, exactly what happened to him is wild. No doubt about that. On the other hand, when I was looking at it from a zoomed out perspective, um, somebody playing football getting seriously injured is not that unique. What's unique about it is the speed at which this happened. So a lot of us know people who played football in high school who hobbled, crippled around, whatever. And there's like this long term effect to the game. I think instantly you see somebody have a very serious condition, um, which in some ways is related to the game of football, and some of it is related just to a total fluke of timing. Um, and we can work on parsing that out. So it's the time of us recording this. He's conscious again. It looks like he's going to do better, and so you'll hear this a few days after we record it, and hopefully he'll be even better by then. So we're speaking about
Mhm.
this on the side that looks like he's on the upswing. So that was reaction number one. Reaction number two was how rapidly things went to prayer,
Yeah.
which maybe it's my American religious cultural cynicism, or I mean, you see people kneeling on the football field, you see all over the place. There's a lot of prayer happening. Somebody even brought it up at our prayer meeting, at church not that long after it, and that's a good thing to pray for people. But it was just wild to me how fast that felt like the natural default response, um, partly because I think something so medically weird was happening to somebody who had certainly all the money they need and the best medical care in the world, and neither of those was enough. And so we very quickly ran to the limits of what was available to us from a physical perspective, and it did seem like there was kind of a natural lean back into um, a prayerful posture. So those are the two main things that I was surprised, and then I was also uh, surprised at the quick call for prayer that went along with it.
Yeah, and I think it's very thinking out loud of us to be very interested in everybody else's interest
Yeah,
in this
it's like,
story,
yes.
the
Why
meta
am I having
interest.
fun?
Well, because it's again, the way it's captured the public imagination is really pretty amazing. And I know that football is obviously a huge American preoccupation. People are very interested in it. We're not among those who are huge football fans. So, kind of the irony of us talking about this right now. But maybe you can help me psychoanalyze myself just a little bit here, Nathan. So, yes, lots of focus on prayer. And I was seeing a lot of people talking about how it is amazing to see sportscasters praying on the air, to see football players praying, and to see all of this religious devotion. I just never thought I would see this in my lifetime. I see that with a degree of suspicion. What's wrong with me? Help me, Nathan. I mean, and I do think this is a deficiency in me. So I don't think my response there is healthy, but that is my response right away. So let's talk that through a little bit.
Okay, we're gonna have to get somebody who's a professional, hopefully listening to this to get us sorted out on this. But let me take a stab at it. I think that um, first of all, it's good. We would never say that people praying is bad. However, it it seems totally incongruous with what we expect of the entire scene and ethos of well, now we got to interrupt our beer commercial for somebody to pray. In the sense that that is when you're using something only as a very last resort, it can seem insincere. It's sort of like apologizing only when you get caught. Uh, that you have this entire um I don't know what the right phrase is. So I guess maybe what, and clearly thinking out loud here and just guessing, that maybe some of what irritates you about it is that if you're going to be very religious, why would you only be very religious at that moment?
Yeah, and I did put you on the spot there, Nathan, too. So that's on me to make you think out loud. Part of it for sure. I think a lot of us do look at the default is to look at prayer as a last resort. Every
Mhm.
other option's been exhausted. You've seen all the experts. You've gone through all of those lists, and now you finally reached the end of your rope, and so now you resort to prayer. Yeah, there's that aspect too, but actually, that's not what gets to me in these instances.
Ooh, we go a
This is gonna
notch
get real
deeper.
serious. Okay, so just fair warning, listeners. This will come at the risk of insensitivity, but I think it's really important, so I'm gonna do it anyway. Okay. And just know this up front. Here's a caveat, or just rather a qualification. Every human being is made in the image of God, and every person is absolutely just with endowed with inestimable worth. So that's really what predicates this thought, and that just has to be said up front. That said, my issue here is that in America, it seems to be the case, and this mindset infiltrates the church, and it might not just be America, but this is my feel as an outsider, as a person who's a transplant to America. We tend to see celebrities as more valuable than other human beings, and that comes out in these instances. And I'm going to give you a parallel example. And I said this would get serious, and this is serious. When our friend Nabil Qureshi died, many of you will know who Nabil was. He was at the time of his death a full-blown celebrity. He had written Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, which is now, this a best-selling sensation, was on his way to I mean, his star was only on the rise. And he was an amazing guy, brilliant, funny, a compelling person, but to Nathan and I,
And very sincere. Yeah.
but to Nathan and I, he
Mhm.
was our friend. Him and
Mhm.
he was a total goober too. I mean, he just
I was
really
gonna say
was.
goofball. Yeah, but yeah, Goober's
Goofball,
good.
goober. I mean, he was our friend, but when he died from cancer, it was a very very fast and sudden process. When that happened, I had quite a few people say, "Why did God let Nabil die?" I mean, how could this is really testing me. How could I mean, he was such a powerful instrument for the gospel. And all I could think was, you know, people are dying of cancer every single day. Not all of them have written bestsellers, but every one of them is just as precious in God's sight as Nabil. I mean, it's not as though God uniquely needed this vessel. I mean, we all by God's grace, if we choose to follow Christ, we get to serve and continue Jesus's mission, but God doesn't need any of us. And also, our value is not dependent on what we do and our achievements. And somewhat similarly here, you have a pro athlete. This happened on national television, so it is very disconcerting when you see a game like this where everything's so tightly controlled, all the camera angles and all those, the drones are flying around capturing all those angles, and then something like this happens, which is just seems very chaotic. Our mortality is suddenly spelled out across the airwaves, and we all see this, and we're all just, it's terrifying. And then, it's once again, you have this big athlete who is, larger than life. And, you have this collective sort of concern and care, but people are, again, people are dying every single day. I mean, death is an extremely normal, I mean, sad but normal part of life. And so when there's collective prayers for one individual who is a stranger to most of us, and when there are supposedly, I'm hearing what GoFundMe's that are, running in excess of millions of dollars and all of that, strikes me as a little bit strange. And again, I said this comes at the risk of insensitivity. So I am completely willing to be, set straight on this. But some of my concern is that we look at certain people as more valuable than others because of their achievements. And that's what worries me in all of this.
Let me ask you, let me ask us, and I'm including you, the listener, in on this question. Who is worthy of your prayers? Is that uh, is that poking into the depth of your question there a little bit, Cameron, in the sense of um, why does this guy get everybody? So the reason that you're tiptoeing around it is because absolutely this guy deserves our prayer. Any
Of
suffering
course.
human
Yeah.
deserves prayer, and prayer is a good
Yes.
thing. So we're saying that. On the other hand, if you're looking, he's also making millions of dollars to play a game that he chose to play. And if I was a betting man, if he's able, we'll go back and do it again. So
Yeah, the first thing he scribbled on the notepad when he could write, and thank God that he can, was did we win?
yeah, to me that seems, is that different? I mean, I just have a whole other list of people that I know deeply who are wonderful people who are suffering physically right now that I'm praying
No,
for
but see, there's a
and
key word you used there, Nathan. You know
that I
them.
know. Yeah.
You know them, right? And so I think the people who is he worthy of our prayers? Of course he is. Every human being is worthy of our prayers. But can you love every human being in the intimate, deep sense that you do your friends and your family? Of course not. I mean, now, are you called to love everybody? Yes, yes. In a generic sense, you have to love everybody. But can you really love everybody in the same way? Well, of course not. So the people who should be in, obviously, I think in the who are devoted most deeply to Damar Hamlin will
Well,
be
yeah,
his family and his
they're there
friends,
holding
his
his hand.
community. Yes, yeah. So that's yeah, you're no, so you're getting at that. And so I think part of yeah, the other another angle on this, and I'm sure many of you have been thinking through this as well, would be what about all the people who are, who are in our immediate vicinity, right? Right in front of us who need us, who need our prayers, who
Mhm.
need our help, who need our money. Are we I just want to make sure that we're examining our hearts and that we're because in America, we public sentiment gets captured very easily for a celebrity. It just does. And we're all conditioned to do that. I mean, that's what our royalty, celebrities are our royalty. We've talked about that before. I mean, that's about
Mhm.
as close to royalty as we get in the United States. But I always think of the the illustration from Charles Dickens's novel Hard Times, where and I can't remember this character's name, and he always has such memorable character names. So that's sorry, guys, mea
Uh,
culpa. But
Existential
anyway,
crisis for Cameron.
well, yeah, yeah, it is. But so there's a woman in this, and she runs a charity in London, and this is Industrial Revolution London, and so there's hunger everywhere. There's starvation happening everywhere. There are children who are, climbing into chimneys at the age of 7 and being worked to death. But her and so these poor starving children will hang out outside on the doorstep of her charity and they desperately want food. and she essentially says, "Get away. This is for people in Africa."
Right. Yeah.
And so I just yeah, that kind of syndrome where you've got needs surrounding you from people who are not as glamorous, but who need your help. Maybe the people who are really annoying, by the way. I mean, think about that. Some of the people whose presence you find a little bit aggravating and who are I mean, they're often I'm sorry, they're the people who need you the most
Mhm.
sometimes. So
Mhm.
I just say that as a I mean, again, at the risk of insensitivity, as a fellow pilgrim, not somebody who's some spiritual sage on a mountaintop speaking down to you at all. Just yeah,
Well, because I mean, and the reason that nobody can speak down to anybody on this is because it's scalable to any size. So
right.
let's say you don't make a celebrity out of this guy, I bet you do of somebody else or somebody locally,
Mhm.
So it's a condition of the human heart. I was thinking one of the really funny examples of this, Cameron, was years ago. There was a Super Bowl, the Patriots, Tom Brady, and the whole thing
Mhm.
about the air pressure in the football
Oh
and the whole
gosh, yeah.
deflate gate thing and all that. So
Deflate gate.
I was living up in Massachusetts, and our friend Alicia Wood is hilarious. Get her going on this because essentially in the all the process around that, Tom Brady got fined. I forget what it was, a couple $100,000 or something. Um, and the workers of Boston made a GoFundMe page to pay Tom Brady's fine. Now,
Oh, I didn't know that. I can't
I don't
oh
off the
man.
top of my mind know how much Tom Brady is worth, but I'm pretty
It's a
sure
lot.
that yeah, that he did not need, all the public service workers and plumbers of Boston to bail him out on that one. And so it's just interesting of, yeah, who gets the attention of, like, what else could have benefited from a couple $100,000, um, in the city? So there's that, but in the back of our minds, we have to be really careful here because there is a time in which somebody lavishly poured some perfume on Jesus,
Mhm.
and you kinda had the self-righteousness of the disciples, like, "Well, this money could have been used, da, da,
You're
da."
wasting
And
all yeah.
yeah, and so God honored the gift and the heart behind it.
Mhm.
Jesus loved it, because she wasn't doing it for any type of reciprocation or anything. It was just an expression of the goodness of her heart. And so
Mhm.
I think it's very possible that there are people that participate in things. Um, and there's also this weird sense that, I was talking to a guy once who didn't make a ton of money. We'll just put it that way, delicately, who paid for the dinner or gave some money for a very wealthy guy to take his wife out for dinner. And
Hmm.
the wealthy guy thanked him and cried and said, "Nobody ever gives me a gift to do small, fun things."
Hmm.
Because everybody knew he had a lot of money. And so it was an entire category of life that he was never on the receiving end of generosity because of his wealth. Um, and so that was a wild, like, there's something for us to think about in
Mhm.
that one too, that, take it as you may, but wrestle with that one a little bit too, of like, the issue
Yeah.
wasn't whether or not he had the money, it's the issue of whether or not he was ever on the receiving end of generosity.
Yeah, and I think that's a really beautiful place to pivot here too, Nathan, because that's the other side of this. I'm looking at the negative side of this possibly being some kind of a waste, which is really harsh. But the other side is looking at it as excessive in the sense of a gift. I mean, imagine also, I mean, Damar Hamlin, it can't to see this outpouring of support will be tremendously moving and
Mhm.
helpful to him and I think encouraging and invigorating. And I mean, I would have to be a very hard-hearted guy to not say that's a good thing. So, yeah, and also, I mean, the plain fact is if we're seeing people praying on the air, sportscasters and all that, I mean, regardless of our scruples about their level of sincerity, that is actually a remarkable thing to see too. So I don't want to I'm not entirely backing down, by the way, from from my
Well,
skepticism,
well,
but
let me
I think we can say that too,
let me see
to
if I can
play the
split the
angel's
atom.
advocate here.
Yeah, let me see if I can split the atom.
Yeah.
Um, so the thing we need to be asking ourselves is our response to a situation like that based off of who he is or how we are?
Hmm.
And so those are not mutually exclusive. I mean, so the same outcome can happen, but there's a little bit of a thing that really irritated about me about like National um, Day of Prayer at school and stuff, where or um, people were praying just to be seen praying.
Sure.
It's like we got to
Yep.
get prayer back in school, so we're all going to rally around the flagpole and pray in order that people can
Well,
see
that was
people praying.
prayer is a political statement rather than
Yeah,
prayer as a sincere act
um,
of devotion.
and
Yeah.
I think you see that before. Um, okay, how do you feel about prayer before a football game or before an athletic event? Um, is that a what? Yeah, so I'm not.
Hmm.
I don't think we want to ever see. We don't want to ever turn the activity of prayer into a statement in and of itself. Couple reasons. One, it doesn't work like that. B, Jesus said some things very specifically about being very careful about that. Um, you don't pray for other people to form an opinion about who you are.
Yeah, that's prayer as performance. Yeah.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah. So anything that is performative prayer, no good. Got that straight from Jesus. However, anything that you sacrificially or whether it be time or energy or goodwill devote towards somebody else out of the generosity of your own heart, whoever that may be, is a beautiful gift.
Hmm. Yep.
And we don't want to exclude the celebrity and the wealthy in
No,
that,
no.
but
Yeah.
we don't also want to prioritize that because Jesus also had some pretty serious words about prioritizing the celebrity and the wealthy as well. So that's not quite an answer, but I'm getting closer to it. Of not the performative element, not based off of who the other person is, based off of an actual response from who we are. And
Mhm.
that being said, if a national outpouring of prayer is a response from who we are as a nation, then again, this should be a massive um, flag slash reminder that we are still a very religious nation. And we're very
You
Christian
know,
to some point.
yes. I think that's true, Nathan. And I mean, just to go back to the first example I gave of scrolling through Facebook, seeing Pastor Brooks and his response. Now it made every sense and it made every bit of sense in the world to me. He is a pastor and he's watching a football game and he sees this young player who's the very picture of health crumble to the ground. Of
Did you,
course, he's going to be outspoken about let's be in prayer for this man and for his family. So, but to see that national outpouring does show you a different side of American culture. I think and that points to an interesting it points up once again the huge disparity between our cultural elites on the one
mhm.
hand. And because I think I'm going to make a broad statement here and this is but I do think this is true. It seems to be the case that sports itself, the world of sports, and boy, do we ever need a guest on here for this one, but it does seem to me just anecdotally and from watching the occasion going my occasional forays onto ESPN and places like this that are really struggling to maintain their cultural relevance. By and large, it seems that the sports fandom and community of sports is a little bit more traditional in their values.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But then you have ESPN, which finds itself caught in the crosshairs because I mean, it's the cultural elites who are kind of cranking the levers behind the scenes. And so you have a more woke mindset entering in, but most sports fans don't want that because they just want to focus on the sport and they don't want everything completely infiltrated by politics. Granted, everything is political in a certain sense, but you know what I mean. I mean,
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah.
they want to watch a football game because they like football. They want to watch basketball because they want to watch basketball, and that makes perfect sense to me. But so because the sports community is a little bit more traditional, it 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 gives you, I think, a little bit of a lens onto just the general American populace. And I do think the general American populace is still quite religious. They may not always go to church, but there's a deep instinctive kind of spiritual impulse that hasn't left yet. Now the cultural elites, that's where Christianity is viewed as a negative, it's seen as socially harmful, but it also it showcases that wide disparity the rest of the nation is not like, certain people in Manhattan and San Francisco and LA.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, but okay, but you might be onto something else here, though, is that people watch sports and entertainment to distract themselves from the big problems of life. I mean, there are lots of reasons to do it, but that by and large is one of those. You get to Sunday afternoon of a crazy week, um,
Mm,
and it's a relaxing thing for people to do because it sets aside, and like you
mhm,
said, well, for a lot of people, like political chaos. However, particularly with football, you're watching really big, really fast, invulnerable people do invulnerable people stuff.
mm, yeah,
And it's totally removed from the way that your real world works. And so you set that apart and you know broken people and you know dying people and you know weak people and you know people who are, having heart attacks and have gallbladders removed and everything else all the time. And so you watch football specifically, subconsciously, to not think about mortality. So then
mhm,
think about the pattern disruption that happens if
yeah,
you're doing the activity that takes us out of the world where our mortality is on display. I mean, football players are like our closest thing to immortal souls that there are, like really fast people who can do crazy physical things and run over each other at high speeds and not get hurt. I mean,
mhm,
there's a god-esque nature to part of our delight of it is that it's like almost a promise of the ability to overcome vulnerability. So take that whole thing, and Travis, I know we're overanalyzing this. You can get Cameron sorted out on this later. Um, that take that whole ethos and then suddenly put a very healthy, very wealthy, very skilled person and watch them take a tackle that's totally normal, stand
mhm,
up, and then just collapse.
yeah,
And you've done the exact, you've just injected everything that football is the opposite of into football. That's
yeah,
going to
really
be a
well
massive
put.
disruption.
Yeah, and it's I mean, along those lines, Nathan, I mean, so many of the people I've talked to about this use the word terrifying. That is the word that comes up more often than any other that I've seen. Oh, it was terrifying to see, terrifying to watch, absolutely terrifying. And I think that this was meant not just, not that, oh, we saw this person collapse and, we're just terrified for them. I think it was a deeper existential terror that you just laid out there. Gosh, this person who is the embodiment of, the ideal physical specimen, to put it just, in really clinical terms, see them crumble like that. My goodness, it's again, it's human mortality writ large, so to speak, and we all feel that in our bones. And this is, yeah, ostensibly a moment where we're supposed to be distracted from all that, and we're supposed to be relaxing and having fun and eating hot wings. And now this happens. Absolute pattern disruption. That's a good way to put it. But yeah, terrifying. I saw that I've seen that word over and over again.
Hmm. So,
So
if that's true though, then prayer is the right response.
I guess we're
Y
coming full circle here. Yeah. Yeah, because you know what? You're right. If you put it like that, you come to a place of a stark recognition of human limitations. I mean, that is one very good inroad into prayer. The recognition of one's own limitations. I mean, obviously another one is, worship and devotion, but that's
Yeah.
another avenue of prayer is one's own limitations. Essentially the shortest sermon ever preached, from the Lord. I'm God, you're not. But yeah, I think you've helped me a great deal as we've thought out loud, more like processed out loud on this one, because you've helped me to recognize that I've got quite a bit of cynicism in my heart that needs to go. But you've also recognized you've helped me to recognize that some of these national outpourings that happen like this are actually signs of life. They're good things, and they give us an encouraging indication of some of what's going on in people's hearts in a way that I hadn't taken stock of before. So I know that we talk a lot about how grim the cultural scene is on here and how there's a lot of disintegration and there's a lot of division. But when something like this happens, I think you get, I'm not certainly not saying it's all roses, but you do get another side of the story. And this one is certainly more encouraging than I had initially thought.
I have an idea, Cameron. Okay,
Was that?
so let's say you're listening to this podcast, you are a big football fan. You see that prayer is a good thing. What would happen if you took out your phone right now and put a reminder in your calendar for this time next year to pray for Damar Hamlin.
I like it. I like it.
So, what if we're going to say his life is valuable and it's valuable enough that I'm going to pray for it now, but I'm also going to pray for him a year from now when theoretically, when hopefully he's totally physically fine, but there will be other things in his life that he needs prayed for. Maybe that's a way. Um, Pray for people at unique times in the normalcy of their life, but then also I think it's a good reminder that say you go Sunday morning service, Wednesday night, something like that, prayer requests are shared. Maybe it's not a bad habit at all. In fact, it's a good one to keep a little journal, piece of paper or something, and write down the prayer request of the people that you know and just pray for them every day until your next public worship
Mhm.
service when you get a new list of names. And so let's, I think the whole thing, Cameron, comes back is it seems like a very selectivity to when we pray. And so let's just be people who pray.
I
And
love
then
it.
this feels like a very normal continuation of a thing that we do,
Yep.
not because of who the recipient of the prayer is, but or the God is the recipient of the prayer, but on whose behalf it is,
Mhm.
and just because of it's who we are, not
It's just a
who the other
natural
person is.
instinct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so maybe that's a habit or something we could work on that would help us even out some of our responses to these things.
I love it. Well, thanks for sticking with us, and thank you, listeners, for giving me the benefit of the doubt as I said some potentially insensitive sounding stuff and worked through it with the help of my good pal Nathan here. And thank you for sticking with us and also for just enabling us to do this. We deeply appreciate your prayers and your financial support. You guys are very generous. And also wanted to let you know that because of your support and your help, we're also on the road again. Nathan is well, so this recording will have will have done some of these things by the time this hits your ears and your speakers. But Nathan will have been in Pennsylvania speaking, and then Nathan and myself and my dad, Stuart McAllister, the three of us will have been in South Carolina speaking
Mhm.
to a group of doctors, and we're very grateful for these opportunities. It's
Yeah,
wonderful to be on the road again, and it's wonderful to be doing what we love and feel called to. So, thank you so
yeah.
much.
Pray for Damar and for Nathan and Cameron. That's basically what he's saying.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Hint, hint. Pray for us too. All right, you've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.